Hi, my name is Tom and welcome to Honest Student Budget. This is part 2 of the dual dynamic driver comparison. If you haven't watched part 1 already, you can click the annotation to part 1 video in the link right here as well, or you can click in the link in the description below. And as I stated in the previous video, you can also click, there's going to be another link in the description below which will take you to my thread over on Head5, which we can discuss more or further about this dual dynamic driver comparison, or you can ask specific questions in the comments below. So let's dive right into the sound. Now in this first comparison, we're going to be talking about the Havii B3 Pro 1 here, which I'm just going to refer to as the Haviis, and the Brainwaves R3 here, which I'm just going to refer to as the Brainwaves. Now both of these earphones have a more balanced sound signature, as in there's no boosted bass or treble. It's a little bit more even keel throughout. Now, just to refer back to my chart here, I said that the Haviis are better suited for classical, rock, and acoustic music because the Haviis have a very wide soundstage and it separates instruments and places things very cleanly throughout, and it's just a very immersive and a very enveloping experience. Now, the Brainwaves R3 here, I think they're better suited for acoustic, ballads, and 90s pop. And the reason I say this is because the Brainwaves also have a wide soundstage, but I think it has more of an easygoing, a more relaxing kind of sound signature. Going into the bass on the Haviis and the Brainwaves here, it's definitely not going to satisfy bass heads in terms of their quantity. It's a lot leaner in terms of the bass line. I think that the Haviis here are tighter and faster in the bass, but the Brainwaves here are a little bit more natural sounding in the bass. Going into the mid-range on the Haviis a little bit leaner sounding. There's a little bit of a scoop in the mid-range, but the detail and the clarity in the mid-range is very good for vocals, and I really like it for that. The Brainwaves, on the other hand, are more natural sounding in the vocals, and I really prefer the mid-range here, and it's a little bit more fleshed out. It's a little more thicker and more fuller sounding in terms of the mid-range. That's what makes me gear towards the Brainwaves more, because it's more natural sounding, it's more even, it's more realistic, and I really do prefer that on the Brainwaves more. Going into the treble, this is entirely up to personal preference. The Haviis have a little bit more of a crisper treble, and I would say it's a little bit more energetic, it's more lively overall. The Brainwaves have a little bit more of a polite, a little bit I don't want to say rolled off. It's not rolled off, but it's still well extended. It hits a little bit of a shelf, but the treble here is very clean. It's very polite sounding. It's very forgiving, and still very detailed overall. Now going into the actual soundstage, the soundstage on the Haviis is single-handedly wider. It's much wider. It's for depth, width, and height as well. It's just, that's the single most unique charm that the Haviis have over the Brainwaves, and the Brainwaves don't even lack in terms of soundstage. It's just the Haviis are just so unique. It's very I've never heard of an earphone as unique as the Haviis. Now in this second comparison, we'll be talking about the JVC FXT90s, which I'm just going to call the JVCs here, and the TTPod TI-Es, which I'm just going to refer to as, or the T1Es, which I'm just going to refer to as the TT Pods. Now both of these earphones embody a signature that's very different from the previous comparison. It's more in your face, it's more aggressive, it's bassier, it's more of a funner kind of sound signature. And I'll just bring back my chart here just really quickly. For the recommended genres for both of these earphones, it's exactly the same. I think that they work very well with pop, electronic, and they make for good all-arounders as well, because they have an emphasized bass line, both of them, but the bass is not so emphasized that it would alienate quieter passages like acoustic music or ballads or anything like that. So I think that they would make good all-arounders. Now going into specifics on this, starting from the bass. In terms of the bass, starting with the TT Pods here, the TT Pods here have a very tight bass line. It's aggressive, it's fast, it's a very well-controlled bass, and south of $100 you'll be hard-pressed to find an earphone that has such a high-quality bass, and it's very reminiscent of the VSonic GR07s, which I mentioned in the full review. And the FXT90s in comparison has a very tight bass as well. I think just a little bit, there is a little bit of a mid-bass hump here in the JVCs, which makes these sound just a little bit more bloated compared to the TT Pods. However, for the most part, it's tight, it's fast, it's textured, it's very well layered as well in the bass. Going into the mid-range, I much prefer the mid-range of the JVCs because the JVCs here have a more natural mid-range. It's much more fuller sounding. The vocals have a much more thickness to it. It's more, I think it's more realistic overall compared to the TT Pods. The TT Pods here have a little bit of a scoop in the mid range, so like male and female vocals are a little bit more thinner sounding. It's a little bit more unnatural as a result, and it's missing a little bit of body to the vocals. So as a result, vocals have a little bit of coarseness to it, especially female vocals. So I think in terms of the mid-range, I would give it to the JVCs. Going into the trebles, I would give it to the JVCs again, because the JVCs are more extended in the treble. There's more sparkle, there's more air, it's cleaner, it's more articulate in the treble. The TT Pods, however, I think are better suited for someone that's a little bit more treble sensitive, because with the JVCs, with that extended treble, with that crisper treble, some people may find this kind of signature to be a little bit fatiguing. So I would steer them towards the TT Pods instead, because the TT Pods have a little bit of a crispness in the treble, but the treble is rolled off soon after that. So as a result, this earphone is much less fatiguing. It's a lot easier listening experience. In this next comparison, this is going to be a little difficult because these two have different sound signatures overall. So we have the Havii B3 Pro 1 on my left here and the TT Pod T1Es on my right here. So the Haviis here definitely have substantially less bass compared to the TT Pods here. The Haviis, I think, are slightly clearer throughout the mid-range compared to the TT Pods. I think in terms of the actual fun factor, it would definitely go towards the actual TT Pods. Going into the treble here, I would say the treble on the Haviis are more extended. It is just as crisp, if anything. I would say it's slightly more crisp, and it's more interesting in the treble. It's more detailed in the treble compared to the TT Pods here, which I think are just I wouldn't say treble shy. I would be hesitant to say that, but it's a little bit more rolled off in terms of the upper treble. And going into the soundstage, definitely the soundstage on the Haviis are much bigger sounding overall. So if you're so these two earphones, I think rather than competing with each other, I think they would complement each other in your collection. The TT Pods, I mean the Haviis here, I think are better suited for more acoustic ballad music. The TT Pods here are better suited for more bassy pop electronic music overall. Now, in this final comparison, this is going to be similar to the Haviis versus the TT Pod comparison, in the sense that both of these earphones have vastly different sound signatures overall, so it's going to be a little bit difficult to compare them. But in absolutes, in terms of bass, the JVCs here definitely have substantially more bass than the Brainwave earphones here. The bass here, I think, is just a little bit tighter, and I think it's faster. It's definitely faster sounding, so it's definitely, again, more well suited for electronic pop music, where the Brainwaves is more of a relaxing listen overall. Going into the mid-range, I think the mid-range here is a little bit of a draw, actually, because the JVCs here have a much more forward, much a fuller, thicker mid-range, and I think this is just really good for like a very energetic kind of sound. It's just a matter of taste in this section, because the Brainwaves, again, very relaxing, very easygoing listen. This is kind of like the kind of sound signatures you just want to unwind after a long day of work. Going into the treble now, the treble on the JVCs here are substantially more sparkly and a lot more aggressive and a lot more, again, in your face. Again, it's very consistent with the entire sound signature. So the treble here is has a sparkle to it. It's crisp. It's much so for someone that is a little bit treble sensitive, this might not be a good choice for you. Personally, I love this treble on these guys. It's very appropriate for the actual sound signature, and it's very well integrated overall. And the Brainwaves here, I think, has a much more polite treble. The treble here is more like relaxing listen, again, similar to the rest of the sound. I would really say between these two earphones, it's kind of a draw for me, but I would be leaning towards the JVCs more, because I do listen to a little bit more of the pop, the electronic music, and I think that these earphones are an absolute dream for those genres of music. So what's my final conclusion at the end of this dual dynamic driver comparison video? Well, I think if you're on a budget, you should look at these two earphones right here. The TT Pod T1Es here are definitely a fantastic option if you're someone that likes your bass, and you want high quality bass and crisp and clear vocals, these are very hard to beat. And I think that this earphone has the widest appeal out of most all of these earphones here, because it's of its price and the fact that you can get different colors and everything like that, and the sound signature is just fantastic. The Havii B3 Pro ones, in contrast, I think has a more of an exotic kind of sound. It's very unique and very different, and I think that it's going to be a fantastic addition to anybody's collection, because I've never heard of an earphone that sounds quite like this. So I think if you want a direct upgrade to the TT Pods in terms of the actual sound signature overall, I think the JVCs are a direct upgrade in terms. I think overall the mid-range is more natural, the treble is more extended, it's more crisper. And a little bit of a spoiler, I think these these JVCs are my #1 favorite earphones right now for pop and electronic music. It is just a fantastic earphone, and I think at its current deal right now at about $50 to $60, it's an absolute steal, and I highly recommend you guys check this earphone out. It's just fantastic. Now the Brainwaves R3 here, it is definitely a more natural sounding version than the Havii B3 Pro ones. It is very, very detailed, and it's very relaxing, and it's very forgiving overall, and it definitely has its great appeal, and I'm still amazed at how great and how natural it sounds, while at the same time remaining balanced and coherent throughout. So I hope you guys enjoyed this comparison video series. If it helped you guys out, definitely hit the like and subscribe button, share with your friends, and if you have any questions, hit me up in the comments below, and I'll do my best to help you guys out, or we can talk about it over on my thread, which is again in the link in the description below. But until then, I'll see you guys in the next video.